some of these things that I'm going to share with you, you already know. But I don't think we always are linking it back to the fact that politics are at play. And there are a number of telltale signs that actually are showing you that there's politics underway. And one of them is gridlock. And gridlock is where the project or the organization or your team just are incapable of moving forward. People are not making decisions. Everyone's all over the show. You just cannot get traction to move forward. So that's one of the first signs. Another sign is bureaucracy, and that's really when you've got so much red tape, so many rules, so many different sign-offs and approvals, and so many different stakeholders that need to give their thumbs up that, again, you just actually can't get anywhere. The next one is around grandstanding, and grandstanding is really where people are paying lip service to leaders in order to curry favor with them. So they say all the right things to leaders around the change, but they have absolutely no intention of supporting or implementing the change whatsoever. Another telltale sign is that of the two-faced two-step, and that's where individuals are really, really great at telling you what they think you want to hear. And as change professionals, we have that a lot. You have stakeholder engagement sessions. Everyone's telling you what they think you want to hear, but it's certainly not the truth at all. And that starts coming out. Another one is passing the buck. We all know this, where everyone's pointing fingers at everyone. It's not my fault that we're behind. It's someone else's fault. And so no one's taking responsibility. And another one, another level of evidence is indirect communication, where individuals are so busy talking about another person to everyone else but that person. You know, and it's so great to actually go, So if I'm seeing this going, if I'm seeing any of these telltale signs in my environment, it should automatically be a flag for you that there's some form of politics at play and that you maybe need to start looking a little bit closer at who's involved and what's really going on. And on that note, I want to hand over to Carmony. So I'm going to turn to our panel, Carmony. So you've been involved in a number of mergers and acquisitions over the years. What have been some of the overt and covert behaviors that you have evidenced that have indicated that were politics at play? And how did this actually impact your projects?
Yeah, thanks, Linda. So firstly, I think I want to say that in my mind, politics also has a positive and constructive role to play in an organization. And in fact, if you want to look up, Lominger and Korn Ferry have included political savvy as one of their 67 leadership competencies. So they've defined it. And in fact, they use words like being able to anticipate and navigate the landmines in an organization. And they talk about being maze bright, right? Being able to navigate the organization and understand how to navigate the maze. So overtly, firstly, mergers and acquisitions by definition is a difficult process. And political behavior is usually triggered by certain changes, and nothing worse or better to see it playing out during a merger or an acquisition, which in itself is a difficult process. So in my experience, there really been two ways in which overt behavior has been used, and it has been through the use of language. So we have in my previous experience, we have very deliberately used the naming of an acquisition. On the one hand, we've labeled an acquisition a takeover, and when you label an acquisition a takeover, you very quickly lay out the expectations of the behavior. So it's the old replacing the new. Very clearly, there is no debate about what's happening here, and it closes down playing off tactics. On the other hand, you could label an acquisition a merge, and when you label it a merge, you're saying that the playing fields are level, we're going to take the best from both, and we're going to create synergies. There again, you very clearly close down the superior-inferiority complex. You know, I'm sure those of you who've been involved in mergers and acquisitions, you often hear leaders will talk about, well, we bought you out. You know, so clearly you weren't good enough. So when you're talking about a merge, you're very clearly saying this isn't about superiority, inferior. That is overt. Covert plays out mostly at an individual level. I know you're going to be talking later about an individual level. And where key people, in fact, in a very destructive way, where key people use client relationships to stunt change, where they would say, I am in favor of the acquisition, however, my clients are resistant to you changing the process, pulling the product, changing the brand, etc. And through that, they ensure that the status quo remains. And one of the ways in which you ensure that you fix that very quickly, in my mind, is that you reduce the key man syndrome of client relationships. So very quickly, what you do is you pull out the individuals who have got key relationships with clients, because clearly what they're doing is they're working to keep the status quo and work against the organization, which means you slow down the change, right? You slow down the transformation, and you start developing your own relationships at a client level. Those are just two examples of covert and overt behavior. Yeah.
Thanks, Carmen. Yeah, I think you've got to have really, really huge political savvy and thick skin to deliver on those sorts of projects, absolutely. I think Harvard Review also did a really fantastic study where they also said that in order for you to successfully navigate organizational politics, one of the benefits is understanding that there are a number of political terrains that you need to navigate as well. So maybe also think about some of the projects or some of the initiatives that you're involved in and where you feel that they would fit in. These 4 different terrains that we're going to be looking at are influenced by 2 key dimensions. The first dimension is the level of political activity, and that could either be at an individual or an organizational level. The second dimension is the sources of power, whether it's informal power or soft power, which is really implicit and it makes use of influence, relationships, and norms. And the other one is your hard and formal power, and that's really explicit power that draws on things like role authority, on expertise, on directives, and reward and control mechanisms. So these different terrains are influenced by those 2 key dimensions. So I want us to start off at the first dimension, and that is our grassroots politics. And if we think about grassroots politics, it's really politics that is driven very much by personal influence and informal networks. It is politics that is very organic, it's dynamic, and one of the examples that I want to give you that speaks to this sort of political terrain speaks back to when I was in recruitment many, many years ago. For my sins, I was in recruitment, and I was moved on to a project. We had about 167 temps that we'd taken over. The client that we worked at was one of the big banks. They had about 450 people in their call center. At that time, they had about 22 recruitment companies, and they chose to rationalize their recruitment companies down to 2. So they then took all of the temps and they split them between our organization and our competitor, and we took on these additional temps. And I remember arriving there, and I was really young, and I was green, and I had bright, starry eyes, and I remember walking into a contact center for the first time that had 450 people in it. And I don't know if any of you have ever been to a 400 and 500-seater contact center, but it's like a sea of desks and partitions and people. It was quite overwhelming. Yeah. Anyway, one of the things that we needed to do is we needed to get timesheets every Monday as a way of processing wages and invoicing the client. So I still remember in my first or second week sending off an email to all of my temps and going, hey guys, just remember your timesheets need to be dropped off at my desk on Monday morning. And I got a response from one of my temps and said, hey Linda, how about you come and you get the timesheet from me? I was like, oh. I was quite wow, okay. So once I'd gotten over myself, I actually took a step back and I thought, yo, what's going on here? So obviously there are individuals that are playing by their own rules here, and there are individuals that are probably quite upset right now. They've been ripped out of their comfort zone with their existing provider. They've been handed over to this company. This company doesn't know who they are, doesn't care about them. They're feeling a little bit unloved. And I really had to just go, okay, this is interesting, because if this is the reaction that I'm going to be getting just to get a timesheet from my people, and this is just one person, what is going to happen when I need to start driving performance discussions? What is going to happen when we need to have a whole range of more impactful sort of changes and issues that we need to manage and that we need to navigate? So if we look at grassroots and the way that we navigate these sorts of environments, there are a couple of strategies that we can look at. The one is around getting involved. So really get involved with the people that you're getting the pushback and the kickback from and that you can see are influencing the situation. Who are the key role players? How do we ally ourselves with the different role players so that we can exert influence over the situation? And can we also identify gaps that we need to fill? So what I did was I walked down into home loans on the other side of the call center and I found this individual. And I was like, hi, are you Arnold? I'm like, yeah, I'm Linda. Thank you. Thanks for the feedback. And what I also started to do is build not only relationships with them, but also let them be my go-to people. Because I knew that they knew the 167 temps that I didn't know. And there were no name tags, there were no names on the desks, it was a sea of people. So I go, listen, I'm looking for Edward. Where does he sit? Oh, okay, great. And slowly but surely, I started building my network with the different individuals, but also realizing that there were gaps. They had been unloved. So what was it that I needed to do in order to try and foster those relationships? And the irony is that 20 years later, that individual and I are still really, really good friends. We still stay in touch. So it was such a great opportunity. It was politics at play, but it was also going, okay, let me understand what's playing out here, and let me see what it is that I need to do to address the situation. So on that note, I'm going to turn to Leah. Leah, so one of the biggest challenges that we face in companies is obviously managing politics, organizational politics. And this can raise barriers that impact our ability to implement change. So what have been some of the organizational political challenges that you've had to face, and how have you managed these?
Thank you, Linda. Good morning, everybody. It's a great place to start, the grassroots, right? So I think there's, when we talk about grassroots, and if we had to kind of layer it in the terrain, we're looking at everybody being collectively an individual contributor in the organization. And the first thing when we start off at that is then there's an attachment and association to deliverables, key performance areas, indices that one has to deliver. And then you have to look at what the individual is looking at. What am I playing for as an individual contributor? So if it's just at the generic level, I'm playing to deliver on results. Then I'm on different level. If I'm team lead, I'm playing to succeed and a team to succeed at all costs or at what I need to deliver at. And at a leadership level is the results of the business. And so what starts to happen here is that people start to showcase different behaviors and navigate differently. And I think some of the points that have been brought out this morning that start to play importance is what exactly is a purpose? Why are you there? And what are you there to do and do differently? And that's not defined by a KPI, it's defined by the human. So if we start to understand ourselves better and say, so I know what it is that I'm working at and wanting to achieve and purposely put out there, then we have a better show up. We show up differently and we start to look at how do I add value? And we start to look at celebrating others, because then if I see my purpose and I understand it, then I see how other people are showing up differently. So in Linda's example of recognizing that this could be a power player in the call center that could assist me is then leveraging off other people's capabilities, their influence, their presence in a business. So we start to show up differently and recognize where we can actually use and leverage other people that show up with the skill sets and the different things that they have. from a change perspective is to use our skills in a political environment to observe these very quickly. Because sometimes you won't have a tool that's going to say to you now, if somebody says, you come and collect the timesheet, what's the action and what do I need to do? But if you understand yourself better and you understand what it is you need to do, you understand that collaborating, connecting, building relationships it becomes the key principle of actually winning in politics and navigating that field. So those are some of the things that I would say consider in the grassroots and being an individual and being purposeful.
Perfect. Thank you, Leah. Any questions from our audience around grassroots politics and navigating politics at this level? Yes.
Hi, I'm Lee from Discovery. I think what you spoke about with the temps and building those relationships on the ground is really important. We've done lots of sort of rollouts, system rollouts that affect the whole organization. And I find that just walking the floors makes a difference to say, this is how you log on. I mean, when we rolled out with, I think it was 4,000 users, you know, you get your discovery steps. So
yes.
The teams really clock their steps. You know, we actually had an activity called walkabouts or walking the floors. And yeah, we got the HR guys to help us do that just to get them logged on. And so I think it's really, really important.
Yeah.